Hey everyone, so we're back with Smoldering Hunger, Chapter 6. Not that we need it, but here's a quick recap. Dr. Sophie Martin meets Darius. They have sex up against a building. She hasn't talked to him in like 2 weeks. He's following a bad guy. Bad guy knows about Dr. Sophie Martin. They see each other in the hospital. Miscommunication occurs, obviously. And that's it. That's the plot so far. I know we're beating a dead horse with this, but I need to bring up the whole ball slapping against the leg thing again. I have two different sources talk to me about this. I have a male friend of mine who said it could possibly happen if a woman has one leg wrapped around a guy's waist and one planted on the floor. That can occur. But a female friend of mine says no, she's done that and that can't occur. And then he told me that when a woman is held up against a wall, he's holding her up by the legs, but her legs aren't wrapped around the waist. But my female friend said that she did have her legs wrapped on a guy's waist when she did it. So I don't know which is correct. They could both probably be correct. I don't know. I wish I could give you first-hand sources on this, but I can't. I'm in the middle of a desert with no water in sight. But if I find my oasis, I'll be sure to try this out and maybe report back with the results. Maybe. Anyway, let's dive right into Chapter 6. There's interesting sort of things that happen, so... Alright. It wasn't the first time Sophie had a day that seemed to never end, but this one took the crown. And then some. It was one craptastic event after another. After seeing Darius, it was as if fate wanted to remind her of him constantly, because she wasn't thinking of him before. She turned the corner at the hospital and saw a portion of a man's face with people surrounding him. Her heart raced, thinking it was Darius, until the crowd moved and she got a full look at him. The disappointment when it wasn't Darius only made her angry. So what if he'd come to the hospital? He hadn't spoken to her. It wasn't like you gave him a chance. You didn't even smile. Smile? She wasn't thinking of smiling when she looked at him. She thought of hot kisses, ragged breaths, and skin sliding against skin. She walked to her locker and opened it. Smile. As if. There was no smiling when her body was heated in such a way. I would smile. You could have at least let him know you were happy to see him. I wouldn't have talked to you either. Sophie hung her white doctor's jacket in her locker. Wow, her subconscious is combative. She then grabbed her purse. It was fine. Better than fine, actually. She didn't want to talk or see Darius. Hadn't she told herself that earlier? Never again, she repeated. You don't have to talk when a sex god like him is doing you. In fact, you don't even have to look at him. I think I like her subconscious better than I like her. With her hand on the locker, preparing to close it, Sophie hesitated. She did want to look at him. He was sinfully gorgeous. There was an air of peril around him. You always wanted to know what it was like to be attracted to a bad boy. Darius wasn't a bad boy. He was something darker, something more wicked. He hadn't been lying when he said he wasn't a good man, and yet she trusted him. That's because he's not a man. He's a shapeshifter. Odd, since she didn't trust men in general. It was his eyes. Yes, his eyes. The deep orbs of the color of rich, dark chocolate. He hadn't tried to be glib or charming. He simply was. Is there other ways to say brown? Like, are we stuck with chocolate? I'm never describing anybody's eyes as the color of chocolate. Was that what drew her? Was it because he told her the truth, uncaring what she thought of him? She hadn't known men were capable of such things. He hadn't flirted with her or tried to be charismatic. In fact, he said very little the first time and nothing at all the second. Instead, his large hand had cupped the back of her head and held it while he kissed her mindless. Her senses had been assaulted with his taste, his heat, his desire, and his smell. Even now she only had to think of sandalwood and chills raced over her skin. Sophie blinked and found herself staring at her reflection through the small mirror in her locker. Her eyes were dilated, her lips parted, and her chest heaved. Damn. Her sex ached to feel Darius's length slide inside her once more, to have him thrust hard and fast. Her breast swelled and moisture soaked her panties. My God, what was wrong with her? He rode you good. Sophie slammed her locker shut and turned on her heel. It was past midnight, and she wanted a few hours of sleep before she went back to the hospital for her next shift. On her way out, she stopped by to check on the woman whose husband had beaten her. The woman refused to press charges or to realize that if she didn't take some kind of action, she could end up dead. It's a really random I guess, plot thread? Sophie paused by the door when she heard voices within. She peered around the corner to see a man with her. He was crying and swearing he would never do it again. How many times had he said those same words? By the woman's medical records and all her broken bones, it had been many, many times. Sophie had done her part. She'd given the woman the same advice they gave every victim of domestic violence. The ball was with the woman. It was in the woman's court. Sophie could only pray that she took a stand and got her life back. She walked out of the hospital. Sophie felt the wind had hit her face with a blast of cold air. A light snow had fallen 2 days ago, and more was on the way. Even after 7 years, she still wasn't accustomed to the harsh Scotland winters. Still flushed from thinking of Darius, she didn't bother to button her coat. Her heels clicked on the cobblestones as she made her way to the street. Unable to help herself, she glanced to the spot where she and Darius had given in to their passion. Wait, doctors wear heels at the hospital? That doesn't seem very comfortable when you're on your feet all day. The shadows hid the location, but she didn't need light to know where it was. For a short time, Sophie had forgotten her past and the betrayals that shaped her into who she was. Come on, we all have shitty pasts. For a brief space, she'd just been Sophie, a woman who craved Darius' touch like she needed air, and it felt so good to give into that. She looked at the ground and swallowed. Damn Darius for showing up again, and damn her mind for not being able to forget about him. It's been 14 days! If you haven't had sex in 7 years and you have sex, what else are you going to think about? When she raised her head, her eyes clashed with chocolate ones. Sophie halted inches from running into Darius. She gripped her purse in one hand and her black medical bag in the other while she wondered what to do. Walk around me, Darius said. What the fuck? Why don't you walk around her? She frowned, anger cutting through her. Hadn't he been the one to come to the hospital, her place of work? Wasn't he the one in front of her now? Keep walking, Sophie. I'll find you and explain, he said in a low voice. I don't understand. If her life is in danger, you should do the right thing and tell her her fucking life is in danger. Ladies and gentlemen, if you fuck somebody on the side of a building and their life is in danger as a result, you should probably let them know. Just saying. I mean, I don't know how many of you do that, but just FYI. She rolled her eyes and walked past him, making sure she ran her shoulder into him hard enough to throw him off balance. That's not juvenile at all. Why had she romanticized their dalliance? Why had she once more found herself making a man into something he wasn't? Darius had told her he wasn't a good man, yet she went and made him out that way. All those nights dreaming of him, of their passion and desire, created a man in her head that couldn't possibly exist. Lady, you met him once before, had sex with him the second time. What are you creating? She opted to walk home instead of taking her usual cab. See? Right there, right there. Maybe you should have told her her life was in danger so she doesn't take a freaking cab home. The air was brisk, and with the snow coming, it might be her last chance for a while. The stroll felt good despite her feet hurting from 2 back-to-back shifts. Well, maybe you shouldn't wear some goddamn heels when you're working like that. That's what flats are for. Sneakers! Sophie was exhausted by the time she entered her flat. She tossed down her keys, purse, and bag at the entryway table. Then she hung up her coat and kicked off her shoes on the way to the bathroom. So much information we don't need. She was unbuttoning her shirt when she paused to turn on the water for the bathtub. After her clothes were in the hamper, she walked naked to the tub and poured a large portion of bubble bath in before lighting the candles set all around the clawfoot tub. Those are just so many details. Just so many details. While the water filled, she turned on some music and shut off the lights. Her newest favorite was the soundtrack to Outlander. Outlander. Of course. That fucking book. She climbed into the tub with the haunting melody playing in the background. Sophie sighed as she leaned back and let the water and bubbles surround her. When the water was high enough, she turned it off with her foot. Her eyes were closed as she relaxed. Slowly, the tension and stress began to ease from her muscles. Her head lolled to the side. Her fatigue was so great she could fall asleep right there if she wasn't careful. The only thing that would have made everything perfect was wine and Darius. With the music playing, Sophie couldn't help but think of him. She'd come across a few Highlanders while in Edinburgh, but none compared to Darius. She didn't even have to ask if he was a Highlander. I keep thinking of the movie Highlander right now. It was in the way he held himself, the way he spoke. It was the look that couldn't be faked or copied. Whatever made a man a Highlander was in his blood, in his soul. Movies and romance books loved to have Highlanders as heroes. Truth be told, Sophie had always found herself drawn to such men. Highlanders valued loyalty, honesty, and family. The alphas who would give their very lives for those they loved. This goddamn alpha nonsense. At one time, she dreamed of finding such a man for herself. She hadn't actually thought it would be a Highlander, however. She had been content to find a man closer to home. But all that changed so quickly. Her world was shattered in a dizzying display as the layers were pulled back and the lies were revealed. Sophie didn't ever think she would forget that feeling of drowning when she realized everything had been a lie and she'd been made into the biggest fool of them all with her fiancé's affair. That's what she got for thinking men were like those portrayed in films and books. Those were characters written by those who crafted them. They weren't real people, no matter how much she wished they were. Darius was the closest she'd ever come to finding those heroes she used to read about. Then he proved he was as flawed as she was, which was a good thing. She needed that so she didn't find herself wanting him more than she already did. How about you don't look at men as heroes? How about you don't put them on a pedestal? How about you treat them like, human beings that make mistakes, that are terrible, that could strive to be better and be good. We all have our flaws. I don't understand this need to flawless. Jesus. She didn't need anyone, hadn't needed anyone in years. She lived her life the way she wanted without having to answer to anyone or take their bullshit. It was just the way she wanted it. She seems to be doing a lot of, rationalizing for being alone. Just stop lying to yourself and own up to the fact that you don't want to be alone. It was just the way she wanted it. Liar. Sophie silenced her subconscious with a vicious kick. Does that work for you guys? So what if Darius made her realize just how lonely she was? Or that he made her think for just a heartbeat how it might be to not be alone anymore? She knew exactly what she wanted, and thought a quick tumble with Darius did wonders for her mentality and physicality. She knew better than to think of more. She shifted in the tub and saw the candles flicker through her eyelids. Sophie opened her eyes, her mouth falling open when she saw Darius leaning against the sink, watching her. Had her thoughts conjured him? Does he not knock? That's trespassing. You do not just show up into a woman's house and go to the bathtub and watch her. That is not okay. That is not sexy. That is stalking. You call the cops. What? How? There's no... She began, only to find her brain shut off. His gaze blazed with unreserved longing while his hands gripped the sink tightly. Despite his lounging, his body was strung as tight as a bow. How long had he been in her bathroom? How had she not heard him? And what did he want? Regardless of the questions running through her head, none made it past her lips. Sophie fought against the tide of desire that swept over her like a surge. It didn't help that Darius looked at her as if he were about to toss her over his shoulder and take her to bed to make love to her. Sophie's sex throbbed just thinking about it. There was no way she'd be able to carry on a conversation if she didn't get her body under control, and there had to be a conversation followed by Darius quickly leaving. There would be no sex. Did you say something? Shit, she was in trouble. The kind that would have her waking up in the morning groaning from soreness? Bad decisions. And Darius was definitely a bad decision. His gaze dropped from her face to the water. A harsh breath left him. Her eyes traveled down his chest to his waist, and lower when she watched the outline of his cock lengthen and harden right before her eyes. His nipples tightened in response. Her nipples tightened in response. When Darius murmured something beneath his breath in a gravelly tone, she jerked her gaze back to his face. That's when she realized her nipples had broken the water's surface and the bubbles now drifted around her breasts. Sophie sank further beneath the water. Darius closed his eyes briefly and drew in a ragged breath. When he looked back at her, he was once more in control. Too bad she wasn't. For long minutes they simply stared at each other. Sophie mentally undressed him, thinking how she'd run her hands over his body and feel his heat and hardness. What are you doing here? She finally managed to ask. As if her words were a punch, she turned his head away for a minute and said, You're in danger. If you ever see me, pretend you do not care. Make sure that anyone who is around thinks you'd rather see someone else but me. I can do that. Had he winced? She was sure he'd winced. Now that was a shock. Since when did her words ever hurt anyone? I only came to tell you that, he said. Sophie was suddenly wretched that he might be leaving. After all her exotic dreams and daydreams of him, he couldn't just leave. But what did she say? Thank you. He released the think and pushed away from it. Darius walked to the tub and leaned down. Be safe, Doc. His lips briefly touched hers. A moan left him the same time her hand snaked out of the water to wrap around his neck. The end of chapter 6. So do they do it? Do they not do it? I don't know. We'll have to wait to find out because, it's so sexy. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. I will see you soon with chapter 7 with the cliffhanger moment. See you later.